Welcome to the Film Geezers podcast. Hello, welcome to the Film Geezers podcast. I'm Robbo. I'm here with Cheeto.
Hello.
And today we're going to be discussing sequels, remakes, and reboots. It's often a controversial topic. First thing we're going to do is define what each thing is. So, the definition of a sequel. So, it's a published, broadcast, or recorded work that continues a story or develops the theme of an earlier one. Now, while some films can be considered both a remake and a reboot, there are some fundamental differences between the two. A movie remake refers to when a brand new movie is made based on an older movie. Movie remakes do their best to stay true to the source material, and they're typically made to feature the same storyline or specific concept. Whereas a movie reboot, they're also when a new movie is made based on an older movie. However, reboots usually do not focus on retelling the same storyline from the source material as remakes do. Reboots can keep as much or as little of the elements and concepts from the previous film as they like, but in the most extreme example, reboots can also completely start from scratch and disregard all previous backstories and plot lines. In some cases, the only thing that they may carry over in a reboot from the original film is just the movie title or a single character.
So, I know there's little subgenres. Like, what would you consider what is a soft reboot? Because I know that term gets used a lot. You know what I mean, for different type of films and stuff.
Well, again, it's that definition between remake and reboot. It can be, a grey area.
Because I know, for one example, obviously you got The Thing by John Carpenter. There was another film called The Thing, made in 2011, I believe, and that's considered a soft reboot because even though it's based sort of on that film and it sticks that premise, it's also its own entity sort of thing. So it's...
I mean, usually they reboot a film to start a new franchise.
Yeah, especially nowadays. It's a very modern thing, isn't it?
Yeah. So before we start, we're going to have a little trivia quiz.
Yeah.
Okay.
I like a trivia.
When do you think the first sequel came out?
Oh, God. I'm going to say, I know a lot of people think that sequels only really came about in the 60s, 70s. I think sequels have been around since films have been around. Is that correct? Or?
1916.
1916?
Yep. There was a film called Birth of a Nation, made in 1915 by D.W. Griffith. Quite a controversial film. And Thomas Dixon Jr. made a sequel called Fall of a Nation a year later. So when do you think was the first remake?
First remake? 50s?
1904.
Even recently? Yeah. Oh, even more.
There's a film called The Great Train Robbery, made in 1903, written, directed and produced by Edwin S. Porter. And that was considered the first real film because it was the one that had the first real film to have a story, a narrative. Because before that, films were just like ordinary things.
Yeah.
So if you remember, a train pulling into a station or something like that. And so in 1904, director Sigmund Lubin released his own version of the film under the same name, and it was almost identical to its predecessor.
Very interesting. Yeah. Like I said, I would never thought it would go back even earlier than the sequels.
Well, it's quite common in early film for filmmakers just to copy what other people do.
Yeah, just to use other people's ideas like that, yeah.
Because I think this kind of follows on into modern films as well. Is why risk your money on a totally original film when you can maybe copy a film or remake it?
I mean, the biggest modern film I can think of, obviously the '98 Psycho film, isn't it? With what's his name?
Vince Vaughn.
Yeah, Vince Vaughn.
Gus Van Sant. Yeah. So and what about the first reboot?
19 40s?
84.
1984. Oh, wow.
And it's a film called The Return of Godzilla. And the Godzilla franchise started in 1954. And the crucial distinction between The Return of Godzilla and all the other preceding Godzilla adaptations was, and the very thing that defines it as a reboot, is that it was consciously and explicitly ignored the past adaptations and it returned to the story's beginnings.
Right, that makes the actual definitions. Now that you used examples, it makes it much more clear what the definitions are between the two.
And so the last one, what was the film that was first used to after the film as for a sequel?
Oh God! Can I have the decade?
1970s.
70s. Can I have the exact year?
74, I think.
74. Oh, would it have been? No, that's not right. I'm just trying to cycle through. Like, that's the thing. I've watched movies, so many movies from all these decades, but like 60s, 70s, I haven't really watched sequels because, like I said, they were still even then quite rare. Oh God. Can I have the lead actor?
Al Pacino.
Godfather Part 2?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah,
oh,
Godfather
wow.
2, yeah. Wow. Because kind of 70s was the decade of the sort of sequel, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So
that's now that you said it, it's like, okay, probably the biggest movie of the 70s, you know what I mean? But I just couldn't think of it, but that's interesting. Like I said, that no one thought to use 2.
Yeah, but you had a lot of like in the 60s, you had like Magnificent Seven and Return of the Seven and the Guns of the Magnificent Seven, but they just didn't use.
Some of the Dirty Harry films, they didn't. They had a different title for each. But I suppose the reason why they changed it to do the numerical thing is so you can maybe sometimes people, if it's got a different title but it's the same like franchise, people may think of it as a separate film where when they're numerical, when they keep the same title.
Yeah, but some sequels like Dirty Harry, for example, they don't continue the narrative, so you can actually watch them as standalone films. You don't necessarily have to have watched.
I've only watched the first one,
so they can be seen as standalone. So they don't have a common story thread like Godfather does.
That's really surprised me. Right, in my opinion, I'm gonna say what is the reason why sequels tend to be worse than their originals. Because I mean, sequels, they rarely eclipse or even get near their originals, don't they? Let's face it. You know, the amount of films that have been out. One example is they may have made loads of money from the original, and they have no incentive to give it their all.
Yeah.
The original cast and crew have moved on, maybe, you know. So there's a different driving force behind the film. They just simply run out of ideas. They kind of maybe write themselves into a corner or something, or the sequel shouldn't have been made, as in terms of they come up with some bullshit thing to bring a character back or bring a story back, and it just shouldn't have been made. They just should have kept it as a standalone film.
Well, quite often, what makes a movie successful is it's the right film at the right time. Yeah. Everything kind of comes together. You get a really good cast, story, and an audience's appetite for it. And it's very difficult to have lightning strike twice.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest example of a film coming out at the right time is probably, would you say, A New Hope?
Yeah, probably, yeah.
Because, the 70s was filled with depressing films, disaster flicks, and here comes along this fantasy film.
Yeah, it was completely different to anything that had been seen before, I think, in the 70s.
So, yeah, that could be an example.
But, you get a successful film, and obviously you want to cash in on the success of that film, so you want to rush out a sequel as quickly as you can, and sometimes that means
they can get ahead of themselves.
You compromise on the story.
They take shortcuts or something, like what I said, where there's not that incentive, that full like when you're making a movie, say you're making an original movie, of course it's your livelihood, and it's your thing, and you want to make money. You need to make money. It's your job, isn't it? Where sometimes when you have all that money from an original film that maybe get lots of money at the box office, there may not be that incentive to fully put the same amount of work as the original.
What's that? An example would be, say, Ghostbusters 2.
Yeah.
Wasn't really great compared to its...
I really don't remember it that much. No. I love the original. I think it's a classic, but I don't really remember the second.
Temple of Doom.
Yeah.
Again, it's kind of a little bit of a weak story, I think, compared to the original.
How I explain it is that Temple of Doom should probably be like just with the Indiana Jones logo. It shouldn't even have that. It should be. It's like a knockoff of Indiana Jones. It shouldn't be the actual Indiana Jones brand. It shouldn't be anywhere near that. But luckily they obviously brought it back with Last Crusade.
And I think maybe sometimes they maybe leave it too late to make a sequel.
It happens all the time.
Crystal Skull.
Yeah.
I think they had so many problems with that, particularly over the screenplay and everything.
There's loads of things why they get put off or something, but
the worst sequels I always find is when they try and create a sequel with different actors.
Yeah, because I don't get why they think that'd ever work in a million years. I remember they tried to do it with there was a Dumb and Dumber film they tried to do it with, wasn't it?
That was a prequel, wasn't it? That was.
But they tried to get Jeff Daniels and Jim Carrey on it, and they turned it down. So I don't know why. What goes through like I said, I don't know why what goes to their head, but it's obviously money, isn't it? Yeah. That's all they care about, because that's what you make movies for, isn't it? Really.
I think when you watch a film, you kind of invest in it. You get invested in the story. You get invested in the characters. And I think when somebody comes along, and it's different with a reboot. When say for example, we say Batman.
Yeah.
You had Michael Keaton, George Clooney, Val Kilmer. Then they rebooted it with Christian Bale. And then they rebooted again with the Batman v Superman thing. So I think that's not too bad.
No, when you reboot it, you cut ties with the previous product. Of course, it's the same source material, but like I said, you cut it. You cut from that previous product, sort of thing. But if it's okay, I'm going to go into what we both think are examples of the worst sequels ever made. I think. Okay. Do you want to go first? You can take it.
Okay. I'll do my. These are in no particular order. Jaws: Revenge.
Definitely.
Because it's odd, because Jaws came out. Jaws 2 wasn't too bad. Then you had a little bit of a break, and then Jaws 3D came out. And the claim is that wasn't really canon. Because you had Chief Brody's two sons in it.
Yeah.
Played by Dennis Quaid. I can't remember the other guy. And he's working at SeaWorld as an engineer. But then in Jaws: Revenge, Michael is working as a marine biologist, and the other son's back in Amity as a police officer, and he gets killed by the shark.
Yeah, it does not make sense at all, does it?
Yeah. And so
that's the thing. When 3 cut, where do you go from that? They had to probably just.
So the story is this great white kills their youngest son.
Yeah.
And then Ellen Brody, played by Lorraine Gary, goes to visit Michael in the Caribbean. And they just a great white happens to turn up.
Yeah.
And she thinks that it's the same one. And that somehow they're able to, track them across the world, and it's got a personal grudge against the family. I mean, to me, it wasn't the worst film.
No, I like 3 and 4.
Yeah,
I like them both, but I can just compared to the original, like that's such a classic, and it is to go from that to this. You know what I mean?
And you know, Michael Caine. Again, I think it's a period when he wasn't. You know, he had a resurgence, didn't he, recently? But I think it was kind of before that.
Yeah.
And he freely admits he just did it for the money.
Was he just brought in for star power? Was that it?
So, yeah. Because he says, you know, he's never seen the film, he's just seen the house that it built. That's his quote.
Yeah, that's a badass quote as well, isn't it?
Yeah, so that's my first one.
Yeah, I just want to say I do like all the Jaws films. I do. But yeah, I as a huge Batman fan, I could not put this in. It's Batman and Robin. It sort of put the nail in the coffin for like the campy, hokey Batman films.
George Clooney Batman.
Yeah, George Clooney. With the bat nipples and stuff.
Yeah.
It's just ridiculous. Yeah, it kind of, like I said, put the nail in the coffin for the campy Batman films of the 80s and 90s.
Who were the villains in that?
So you had
Two-Face.
So you
Is
had
that the one with that.
In specific Batman and Robin, what I can tell you is in all those Batman films, you had people like the Joker, obviously Jack Nicholson. You had Danny DeVito as the Penguin. You had Tommy Lee Jones as Two-Face. Arnold Schwarzenegger in Mr. Freeze.
Poison Ivy.
Yeah, but they were really they weren't like serious. The costume design and stuff, it was just over the top, and I don't know. This thing is hard because I don't know if that's what they were going for. Because if that's what they're going for, fair enough. But I just think it got to the point where it was kind of a parody of itself.
It's almost a throwback to the 60s TV show.
And I thought if you look at cinema of the 90s, especially the 90s, it was very serious. You think the films that came out, and you just get like I said, it wouldn't look out of place in the 66 Adam West film, would it, you know? But I don't even see any reason for them to pump out these shitty Batman films of this era other than to make a lot of money. That's literally what they did. Yeah. And of course they made money because it's Batman. You know? That's what happens when you get, I think was it Warner Brothers, I think. You know, they own Batman and they're like, you know, I want to make some millions, so I'm going to pump out. And that's the thing, there's no thought behind the stories. They're just, like, the first Batman film isn't actually bad. I really like the first Batman film. Obviously, it's the Michael Keaton one. It's very, a lot of people think that because the ones further in the saga are so, like, hokey that it's so light-hearted, almost a comedy. But no, the first Batman one, the first one with the Joker, Jack Nicholson, is very dark, and I think it perfectly portrayed Batman. But it's like that thing where how can you get from that to that? You know what I mean? Just a couple of films. So I just think the reason why it is such a bad sequel is because, one, it's a dire film. It's sort of got, I guess it's sort of got that entertainingly bad sort of thing. But I think for a Batman film, that's not what you should be going for. And I just think it got so, like Jaws, it got so far away from its source material that it's just, it should be a standalone film. It shouldn't even be connected to that. So I'm glad we got past those hokey 90s films. But yeah, that's the reason why it's first on my list.
Okay.
Over to you.
All right, my second is Rocky 5.
Yeah. It's in a lot of lists, isn't it?
I liked the Rocky films. I've got to say probably Rocky 4 is one of my favourites.
This thing, we like Rocky, we like Rocky 2, 3, 4,
Yeah.
Balboa, we like all of them apart from really 5, isn't it?
So, I mean, the story is that he's fought Drago in Rocky 4, beating him in Russia.
Yeah.
He loses his boxing license because of a brain injury. So he decides to retire from boxing, and he takes on responsibility for training a young fighter, Tommy Morrison. And in the end, they end up having a street fight, and that's the big fight sequence in it.
That's the thing. Once again, how can you go from like the prize fights of Apollo versus Rocky to him having a street fight? It just doesn't make sense at all.
To me, it's just one film too far. They didn't need to make it. It's just not a good film, and it could have quite easily killed the franchise. Really.
I mean, they got lucky with Rocky Balboa because I tell you, if that would have been the final film, that would have been basically its legacy, isn't it? You know, but I'm glad it didn't. So my next one, I'm going to keep this short and simple, is Dumb and Dumber 2. Now I don't know if you have ever watched it.
I did try to.
It came out in 2014.
I didn't get through the whole film.
Well, just the actual name of the actual film itself just sums it up. It's Dumb and Dumber, and they spelled 2 with T-O. I was like, that's the type of comedy they think is acceptable. But it was an obvious cash grab, and it maybe even, obviously not to me, but it maybe even potentially slightly tarnished the classic Dumb and Dumber name to some people. It's just one of those films that didn't need to be made again, and I think that's a theme of a lot of these films. They just didn't need to be made, and in my opinion, Jim Carrey and Jeff Daniels were too old for this film. Like maybe, I don't know, 10 years ago if they decided to bring out one, but it made them look silly. They're old men now, you know what I mean, and they're doing all this slapstick stuff that you'd expect from like youngsters, and it's all around just a terrible slog of a film. And like I said, the worst thing that you can do with a comedy film, especially comedy, is make it boring, because you know you got some classic comedies that aren't really considered, that are never going to win an Oscar, but they're entertaining and you can watch over and over again. But this is just all round a terrible film. But like I said, I've only watched it once. I'm glad I've only watched it once. So yeah, that's my number 2.
My third one is Superman 3.
Yep.
Loved Superman. That was kind of the origin story. Established the character.
Yeah.
For those people who didn't know who Superman was. Superman 2 was good.
Superman 2 is actually my favourite of them. Yeah.
Superman 3, not so good. That stars Robert Vaughn as a billionaire who is this evil billionaire, builds a supercomputer to control the weather, and it's got Richard Pryor in as kind of this computer genius, but it's just trying to inject comedy into it, and it just kind of doesn't work.
See, I've never seen it, but even to someone that hasn't seen it, it just seems so out of place to put that into that, you know.
Because you kind of got Richard Pryor doing his thing, which is fine, but in a sort of, I think they were trying to go for like the campy thing, but it just didn't work because it just wasn't a good film. So that's as much as I can say about it, really.
Like I said, I've never seen it, so I can't add about it. Right, my next film is A Good Day to Die Hard.
Yeah.
Now, this isn't anything against Die Hard. I love Die Hard. I think Die Hard is one of the best action films of all time. I also love a sequel to Die Hard, which is quite, I guess, funny because we're bashing them, but it's Die Hard Without a Vengeance. That's very good, but this one is just, have you ever seen it?
Yeah, I mean, like, I think Die Hard 2 got rushed out, didn't it?
Yeah.
Just cashing on and it's not a bad film.
No, it's I think it's one of those films, if it came out, if it was Die Hard 1, then it'd be a decent film, but because it had an absolute classic before it's always going to be compared to that, you know, but
Die Hard with a Vengeance was good. Enjoyed that.
Really good film. Die Hard 4 was surprisingly good.
Yeah.
It's 4.0, isn't it? Yeah.
But
but
you get to a point where they just don't realise that it should end.
Yeah,
really.
I mean, it's one of the most obvious cash grabs of all time. When I watched it, there's literally no need for this film to exist whatsoever. Bruce Willis doesn't even look interested in the film. You can actually see him, and at some points he even has like a smirk on his face because, like, probably
thrown it in there.
Yeah, he's got the smirk on his face because he knows he's made the easiest money of his career. You know what I mean? It's an absolute, once again, an absolute slog to sit through. And we love films, but just even there's even some films we just can't watch. And like I said, it's a film I'm never going to watch again. Like I said, old Die Hard, very close to my heart. With Avengers close to my heart, but this one's certainly not. I'm never going to watch this one again, and I don't recommend anyone else to watch it. So,
Okay.
right.
Yeah, my next one's Godfather Part 3.
Yeah,
Love the Godfather. Love Godfather 2. All I can say about Godfather 3 is why.
yeah. Was there no need for it to be made?
No, not really. It was just poorly made. Really, that's all I can say about it.
Oh, was it these? Because I know it was made. It would have been 17 years later after the original. Did it have this? Was it the same studio? Was it the same cast? Was it like the same people behind it, producers, directors? Was it?
Yeah, it was made in 1990, so 16 years after the second. It was written and directed by Coppola.
That's really surprising.
Written by Mario Puzo, had Al Pacino in it, Andy Garcia. And I guess the only thing that really sums it up is it wasn't as good as the first two. And massive nepotism. Coppola had his daughter, Sophia Coppola, in it. And she just isn't a good actor.
I can't stand that when they do that. And it's a massive turn off for the film, but...
Yeah. I mean, she's a good director, but not a good actress at all. I mean, Talia Shire is actually, she was in it. She also played Rocky's wife.
Oh, yeah.
That's actually Coppola's sister.
Oh, really? I did not know that at all. Wow.
Yeah. So,
decent bit of trivia there.
So nepotism does work, but not to that extent.
No.
So what's your next one?
My next one is Speed 2, Cruise Control.
By that, I think I've maybe seen it once.
I saw it once, and what it was is I think I came back from a party or something, and it was late at night, and I just put it on, and I watched it, and I was like, oh, okay. I'll tell you, I don't blame Keanu Reeves for turning this sequel down, you know what I mean? Jesus Christ. Sandra Bullock reprises her role, but like Bruce Willis, she knows that she's made some easy money there, and you know what I mean? They kind of tried to have that Keanu Reeves character by bringing in Jason Patrick, but it's not Keanu Reeves, so it doesn't work. He's terrible. Like I said, he tries to be Keanu Reeves. Speed 2 is the same film as his original, just in a boat, and of course, miles worse. It's not original, and it's boring because they literally, like I said, they've done the same film, just tweaked it slightly, and it just doesn't work. That's all much I can really say, because I remember the final scene was they're about to crash into this dock or something, aren't they? And you can tell it's gonna be one of those endings where at the last second they stop it and everything will be fine, you know. So it's just a generally boring film, and like I said, that's one I'm never gonna watch again. So yeah, Speed 2, Cruise Control. Mm-hmm. Right, now on to yours.
Yeah, so my last one is the Sting 2.
Yeah.
The original Sting was 73. Starred Paul Newman, Robert Redford, Robert Shaw. And the thing about this was made in 1983. And it's really weird because it stars Jackie Gleason.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
And Mac Davis, but they're not playing the same characters, which is because Paul Newman played Henry Gondorff, and Jackie Gleason's playing a character called Fargo Gondorff.
That's odd.
Although they are kind of modelled on those same characters. Redford played Johnny Hooker, and Mac Davis plays Jake Hooker.
So are they relatives to?
No, they're not. That's the thing.
That's odd, isn't it? Yeah. I don't know what they were thinking.
The main bad guy in the original Sting was Robert Shaw played a character called Doyle Lonergan. Well, in this film, Oliver Reed plays Doyle Lonergan.
That is so weird. So
it's almost like a reboot.
Yeah, and a sequel at the same time.
And it just doesn't work.
I'm not surprised that didn't work. To be fair,
you're trying to shoehorn different actors into a film, and it just doesn't work. So That's all I can say about
Yeah,
it.
like I said, I can say I've never seen that film. And my last bad sequel is Terminator 3: Rise of the Machines. There was probably a lot of hype to this sequel, to be fair. I don't know, I was 2 and 3, I would have been 4 years old. Just down to the previous 2 films being instant classics, This film completely misses the mark for me. It feels like whoever wrote the script didn't really care about the Terminator story or lore. It's literally the same premise as Terminator 2. A bad Terminator goes back in time. A good Terminator is sent back to stop it. But this time it's a woman. That's just laziness, as they actually thought that this would differ it drastically from the other films when it doesn't. This film can't even be named in the same sentence as the 2 prior to it. And it's another one where I look back to this film and they could have done so... Like, it's weird to say, but it's actually a really good idea. Because it explores, obviously, Skynet, how actual what Doomsday is in it. I don't know if you've ever seen it. At the end of Doomsday,
I don't remember.
They show the whole Doomsday scene and what it's like, and we never saw that in the previous 2 movies. But they just they completely messed it up. And like I said, it's I've not watched this since, and I'm not going to watch it again, even though I'm a huge Terminator fan. And Arnie's not that bad in it, to be fair, but he, like I said, he knew he was going to get another good paycheck, so that's probably why he did it. But yeah, that's my last bad.
That's good.
I mean, once in a blue moon, we do get a sequel that is better, or at least on par with its original. So what's your first one?
I'm going to go with Empire Strikes Back.
Yep.
I obviously do like A New Hope.
Yeah.
That launched, the franchise. Without New Hope, we wouldn't have Empire. But that goes back to a few of mine choices. Is what you sometimes tend to find is that if it's a low budget film, the original is a low budget film that's really successful, then they want to put out a sequel. And Star Wars New Hope was considered a fairly low budget film.
Yeah.
He didn't. I don't think Lucas could. He claims that he couldn't do a lot of things in that he wanted to do. That's why he did That's why he did the digitally enhanced re-release.
Yeah.
And obviously, given access to a bigger budget, sometimes you can produce a better film.
Certainly does help.
Yeah. But in the case of I can't really pinpoint why I think it's bad. I just think maybe it's the storyline, maybe it's Darth Vader, which is one of my favourite characters.
Yeah.
Maybe introduction of Yoda.
Well, for me personally, I can see not exactly night and day between New Hope and Empire, but I can see just as a takeaway Star Wars, as 2 movies, Empire is the premiere of that. Obviously, George Lucas didn't write this one, was it? It was
Lawrence Kasdan.
Cinematography is much better. The fight scenes are much better. Like I said, with the bigger budget, you can have better effects. It's just a lot of it. I think a lot of things fell into place, and the bad guys essentially won, which wasn't seen at much at the time.
It was a darker film. Obviously, probably the biggest twist in film history at the end.
Yeah, of course.
Up to that point,
Irvin Kershner directed it as well, so that he could have had something to do with that. Obviously being George Lucas's old teacher, wasn't he? Yeah. So, like I said, I just think it's a load of different things that came together to just make this. It's such a perfect film, and I think even though we're Star Wars super fans, I think it's in our both top 10 of all time, isn't it?
Definitely.
Right, my first is you personally, Robbo, are probably not going to be that interested, but it's Captain America: The Winter Soldier.
Yeah. I'm not a big fan of
Marvel films.
I'm not a big fan of remakes and reboots.
Yeah.
And they seem to be, the Marvel ones seem to be the ones that do most of them. The fact you had 2 reboots of Spider-Man since 2000. You had 2 reboots of Fantastic Four since 2000. So yeah, just, if you're going to remake a film or reboot it, I think it's got to be a good film.
like I said, I think it's different, obviously, because we're different generations, isn't it? You know, I grew up. This is my generation of films. I grew up with these films. These are the biggest films of sort of my generation. I mean, in my opinion, the film is the best film in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, which is all of the 23 Marvel films that Marvel Studios themselves made. Because a lot of, obviously, Sony bought the rights back in the 90s to some of the properties. Marvel then acquired them back and made their own studio.
So I read Sony could have bought the entire
they could
Marvel characters,
but they decided
to buy Spider-Man only.
Yeah.
They didn't think Iron Man would actually, because at that time the rest of the characters were just kind of peripheral, weren't they?
C-list characters, but they bought all the A-stars like Spider-Man, X-Men, I think Fantastic Four, but what could have been. But I am glad they didn't, because I don't know, it just does everything right, this film. The original Captain America was a great but simple origin story of one of the most iconic superheroes ever. Like I said, it is very simple because it had to be. They had to play it safe so casual viewers can become integrated with the character and the actual story itself. I still love the original though. It's a wartime movie above everything else. I think you'd quite like it, but I know you don't want to hear that. Captain America: The Winter Soldier just builds on and carries on the story. The intro is an amazing all-out action thriller boat scene that just kicks off the film. It introduces new characters. You got the Winter Soldier and Falcon, who had another level of world and story building to the film. It also includes Scarlett Johansson's character Black Widow, which is always a bonus. You know what I mean? The genre of the film is more like an espionage crime thriller than a superhero film, and that's what I love about superhero film. When they don't chuck it down your throat that it's a superhero film, they put the film and the genre first and foremost, and they just make a great film that just happens to focus on superheroes. But that's why I think that Captain America: The Winter Soldier is better than the original. But like I said, I love both films.
Cool. All right. My next one is Mad Max 2.
Yep.
And going back to previously what I said, Mad Max was kind of a sleeper hit. You know, this small Australian film, low budget, did phenomenally well. So a sequel was kind of inevitable.
Yeah. Did it get picked up by American?
Yeah. Obviously made a star of Mel Gibson.
Yeah.
Mad Max 2.
Does it differ a lot from the original?
Yeah, because the Mad Max is pre-apocalyptical.
Yeah.
Whereas Mad Max 2 is post-apocalyptical. So it is kind of a different storyline a little bit. But obviously it's probably just the budget makes it, a lot better because they can do a lot more with it.
They probably had obviously better cast, better writers, better producers, all that behind the scenes.
Yeah. So that's all I can say about that, really.
Okay. My next is Terminator 2: Judgment Day. In my opinion, this is the best of the Terminator movies by quite a long margin.
But again, going back to that, it was obviously the original was made on a shoestring budget.
It could have a lot to do with that.
But Terminator 2 is an action film.
Yeah.
And that seems that's your favourite
I loved it. I love that type of...
which, again, all of these are very objective.
It's just, like I said, this is all opinion here, you know what I mean? Other people are going to like Terminator 3, you know what I mean? But that's fine. But I'm not saying that the original is bad, of course. No. It's not. It's a classic. I just prefer what they did in the sequel. First off, the film is like completely turned upside down when we're introduced to not one but two Terminators. The T-800 played by Arnold Schwarzenegger and the T-1000 played by Robert Patrick. Arnie is the good guy. Spoiler alert.
Well, it's because he wanted to turn his image around, didn't he? And he wanted to make more sort of family-friendly films as well.
Obviously, Kindergarten Cop at the time, Jingle All the Way. Yeah. But like I said, spoiler alert, but it's been what? God...
90s, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's been
at least 20 years, for 30 years.
29, 30 years now. So good, unlucky. And the T1000 has upgraded liquid metal version. So that already raises the stakes. The film completely switches up the tone of its original. The first Terminator movie was an out-and-out horror film, in my opinion. Whereas this one is a bona fide action film. And like you said, I just love action films, and I prefer this one to its original. But like I said, that's taken nothing away from the Terminator, like the original, because of it was literally all it was is James Cameron. He was up. No one heard of him. He's another one that writes his own movies as well, which I respect. He just had an idea and got it done, didn't he? And he produced the Terminator out of that. And without the Terminator, that's the thing. Without the originals, we'd never got these sequels. So you got to give it to the originals as well, don't you? So
and it had sort of groundbreaking special effects at the time.
That even you could say arguably stand up today, can't they? You know what I mean? It's I've seen much worse CGI in mid 2000 films than I have an early 90s film. You know, so. Yeah, like I said, that's one of the reasons why, and it's not just one of my favourite sequels; it's one of my favourite films of all time. So, on to yours.
Right. Surprisingly, my next one is Logan.
Yep.
I say I don't mind the MC films. I mean, I watched the original X-Men.
Yeah.
I think I watched the sequel to that as well. I just think this there's only so far you can go with characters and story and without repeating yourself.
Yeah.
But I just love Logan because it is, again, a lot darker than... It's not really a comic book story like the others.
No.
And I just love the way they deal with an aging superhero.
You never really see that, do
No.
you? And it's a different way, it's a different take on things.
Yeah. You've got like Professor X, who's got I think it's dementia, and he finds it's difficult to control his power.
Yeah.
So he's having to obviously medicate himself. And you've got Logan, who's the adamantium skeleton is slowly killing him. So he's not able to heal himself like he could. And I think it's just a wonderful story that you don't often see, like you said, what happens to superheroes when they get old.
Yeah. I mean, Hugh Jackman...
he's not technically a superhero, but, it's just like what happens to these characters when they get old, and you don't see that, and it's just beautifully...
Like I said, with Hugh Jackman, I think he definitely put in probably his best performance ever. You can see in the recordings of it, even in the sound, he probably goes method for this, and you can see that, definitely.
And there are two versions, and I would highly recommend watching the black and white one, because I think that just adds something to it.
Yeah. It's crazy how little things like that can just change a film. Like we were saying the other day with Psycho, that completely they could have shot it in colour, but no, they shot it in black and white. And like I said, little things like that can just...
But like in a lot of cases with sequels, they want to keep the characters the same age they were throughout, and you've got an actor who's getting older.
It's just not real, is it?
And
it's not reality.
It looks stupid. I mean, that was the good thing about the sort of Crystal Skull, was that they allowed Indy to get older, and play an older version of himself. But it's a bit stupid when you've got a 50-year-old actor trying to play a 30-year-old again.
And that, believe us, that does happen in a lot of films. So. Right.
So that's my third one.
Good choice. Right. My next is I always bang on about this film. It's just because I love this film, and I'll defend it to the day I die. It's The Dark Knight. I know it's up in all my lists. You're probably sick of it.
No, I've seen it and I like it. It's just not a film that I would watch over and over again.
Well, in my opinion, like this is literally one of the greatest movies ever made. Like I said, in my opinion, it's I love the whole Dark Knight trilogy and all their films. They are films that I hold remarkably close to my heart, but it's pretty obvious that this one is the best. Like Captain America: The Winter Soldier, it completely and utterly builds on its original, and you can see there was a bigger budget, more room for exploring different ideas, and almost a sense of freedom. It's original. Batman Begins is another brilliant film, but like Captain America: The Winter Soldier, it's very limited on what it can do due to it being an origin story. Christopher Nolan just took the shackles off and went on a mad one. Joker is a huge part of this film, obviously, being better due to the fact that Heath Ledger gives a generational performance. He is so well written. Us, the viewer, can almost sympathise and see the method to his madness. And I think that's the key when trying to write a really good villain. The Dark Knight just kicks the door off its hinges and doesn't take shit from no one. And I just love the film, and I just love that it. When I first watched it, I didn't know where this was going to go because, like I said, you hear Batman, and you're like, okay, it's going to be the same story, but it really isn't. And it's another one like Captain America that it is it's a gritty action thriller above everything else. Of course, there's a Batman film because it's got Batman in it. It's got all of his characters, Gotham, and so. But you could have Christian Bale play an ordinary guy, get Heath Ledger to play an ordinary guy, not the Joker, and take away the Batman, the Gotham, and it'll still be one of the best thrillers of all time. So that's why it's definitely up there of my best films of all time.
Yeah, good.
Right, on to yours.
All right, the next one is Superman 2.
Yep.
Why is this better than Superman 1? Well, the plot is, so before the destruction of Krypton, the criminals General Zod, Ursa and Non are sentenced to banishment into the Phantom Zone. And so the start of Superman 2, the Phantom Zone, is shattered near Earth, and they're freed and they make it to Earth. So now you've got three bad guys with the same powers as Superman.
Yeah.
Which you don't often get in
because that's a problem with Superman films even nowadays, is that Superman is just too strong.
Yeah.
But you never see someone who can match up, and that adds more stakes to it.
And you've got Terrence Stamp playing General Zod is just, I think, one of the ultimate bad guys.
Yeah, legendary performance, definitely,
Yeah. So I just think that makes it a lot more interesting when you examine, you've got a superhero who's coming up against somebody who's got the, same powers as he has. Because actually, they filmed Superman and Superman 2 consecutively at the same time.
So was it Richard Donner done Superman 2 as well?
No, it was Richard Lester.
Oh, okay.
Did it? And the problem was that they had problems with Marlon Brando and stuff. Yeah. So they decided to abandon Superman 2 for a bit and then finish Superman 1. And then they returned to Superman 2. I think it was about 75% done.
It's amazing they got Superman 2 out of all that. You know what I mean? It's just the stars aligned for it.
Yeah. But I think it's just a better film. Because it is. I mean, it's like with any film. You first of a series, you're establishing character. You
it's very formulaic, isn't it?
It's the origin story, the backstory.
Yeah.
So there's probably like with Superman, the first half of the film or even more is showing him coming to Earth as a baby, growing up. And you only get to sort of the action bits right at the end.
Yeah.
So this one, obviously, with a sequel, you can go straight into it. You know the character.
You've established that avenue,
and you can just go straight into the action then.
Like I said before, Superman 2 is my personal favourite, and I love the action scenes in it as well. It's very good. Like I said, it's almost an all-out action film, and you know how much I love action films. So it's a really good film. Once again, this next film is one I always bang on about, Aliens.
Yeah.
I think it's another sequel that is just as good as its original. This statement can be controversial to some, but agreed by others. I love the original Alien, let's not beat around the bush, but like Terminator 2, Judgment Day, I just love the all-out action of the sequel. Like I said, I'm a very big action head.
I mean, Alien you could describe as a horror film.
Yes.
Whereas Aliens is...
I wouldn't even call it a horror film.
No?
Like I said, to me, Aliens is a sci-fi...
No, Alien, the original.
Yeah, Alien is a horror film, yes.
But Aliens is an action film.
All that action film, sci-fi. You can see it as a much bigger budget. This is evident to the huge main cast of the film. It has a total tone shift. The original was all about the suspense, crampedness, and the fear of the unknown. Whereas its sequel was all about thrills, explosives, and action. The most obvious reason for this tonal shift is because of the change of directors. Ridley Scott and James Cameron have two very different styles, and it shows. Like I said, this is not me bashing Alien. I love Alien. Alien is one of my favourite films of all time. I'm a huge fan of Halloween, and that's built off suspense. Alien is another one that's built off suspense. I love when a film can make you feel those true human emotions, and it certainly does that. But I really am a sucker for explosives. It's all that action, and yeah, that's why it's on my list. So, yep. And your last one?
It's The Godfather 2.
Yep.
So, the premise is that, the end of the Godfather film, Al Pacino, his character Michael, he's taken over the family. He's assumed his father's position as Godfather. And so, Godfather 2 is actually, it's kind of two films in one, because it cuts in between two storylines. So the first storyline is Michael consolidating his power.
It's during the 50s, isn't it?
Yeah, it's in the 50s, yeah. So there's that storyline, and then there's the other storyline goes back to 1901 and follows Vito Corleone, that's his father, when he came to America from Sicily, and how he essentially became the Godfather. Yeah. So it's Robert De Niro plays the young Vito, for which he got an Oscar.
Yeah, oh, wow.
And that's
I didn't know that.
The only time that two actors have got an Oscar for playing the same character, but in separate films.
Wow, that's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah. But it just is. I guess, like we say, part one of a film is always going to be the establishing, and although it's a good story as well, this just goes on and explores, what you can't really do in a first film is sometimes you haven't got time to fully explore characters and fully flesh them out. Whereas with this, it does. You can actually. It's just I just find it just better than the original. Only just.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of people agree to that on polls. Right, my last film is Under Siege 2: Dark Territory. Getting the representation. Yeah. It's a sequel many people may not know about. It is, of course, a sequel to the Steven Seagal action film Under Siege. Now, both of these films fall into the same category of bullshit 90s action films that we love, isn't it?
Yeah.
But they're both guaranteed to give you a good time while watching. The reason why I think that the sequel is better than the original, because let's face it is just Under Siege 1, isn't it?
Yeah.
But instead of it being set on a boat, it's on a train. It's because it does somewhat differentiates itself from the original. It's got a whole new plot. I think a lot of people don't realise it's actually a different plot besides the train bit.
The overall plot is still the same. A guy's trapped in a situation.
But I mean, from the bad guy's point of view.
Oh right, yeah.
So it's like I said, it differentiates itself from the original. It's got some new characters, and for some weird reason, I just like the train setting more. I think it also has one of the best endings when Casey, played by Steven Seagal, somehow defies the laws of physics and outruns Little with fire. He then proceeds to jump out the train before it crashes off the tracks. He literally jumps like 20 feet onto a ladder, dangling from a helicopter. I just love how the film doesn't take itself too seriously, and that it knows what it is and it executes that perfectly. Like I know it's not going to win an Oscar, you know what I mean? But it's one of those films that you can just put on and rewatch. Like this is one of my most watched films of all time. Like say Shawshank. You got to be in the right mind. You got to be set. You got to set your mind. Your brain has to be. You got to be in the right mood. Where it's a film like Under Siege 2, you can just put on and have a good time in it. When you're eating or something. So that's why it is my last film. So I think we're going to talk about films that are bomb now, haven't we?
So we've got some remakes and reboots that really didn't take off. First one, Men in Black International.
Have you ever seen it?
I haven't. No, it had $110 million budget and has earned about domestic earnings was like 40 million.
Did you ever see any of the original Men in Black?
I saw the first two.
Yep. There was three of the originals, and I liked all three actually. I remember seeing the third one in the cinema, but this, because I've seen the new one, it just is the same film. It's the same premise, and
but sometimes what makes a film good like that is the chemistry between the two.
Yeah, they
it's
don't
like
have
that
it at all.
buddy kind of. It's like, can you imagine Lethal Weapon being the same without the main actors in it or anything like
chemistry
that?
Between characters is such a big thing, and like they don't have it at all, and it's a boring film. Yeah. So, and that's a sin.
The next one is The Mummy. Now,
is that the Tom Hanks?
That's the Tom Cruise
one. Sorry.
Yeah. So from a $125 million budget, it made 80 million.
And that was sort of a soft reboot, wasn't it, from the Brendan Fraser ones?
I liked the Brendan Fraser ones.
I did. They were fun.
The Mummy seems to be a film that's been remade a lot. I mean, you had the original 1930s Universal one with Boris Karloff.
Yeah. You
had the 50s one, the horror Hammer one with Christopher Lee.
Yeah.
And then obviously you had the Brendan Fraser in 90, and I think there was three of those. And then this, obviously, I didn't see it.
I've seen this, and I saw all the advertising. I was like, oh my god, this is gonna be a brilliant film. And I was like, how can this fail? But it just was bad. It was like any other film. It was just, it didn't stand out at all. It was just a CGI fest. It really was a bad CGI fest.
From what I've read, a lot of people blame Tom Cruise, saying that he had too much control over it.
Which he does, doesn't he? He likes to dip his fingers in, you know.
Yeah. So the next one is the 2008 Incredible Hulk, which I think you've got a lot to. Which itself was a reboot of the 2003 film.
It's the thing. Hulk. He's a big. Of course, he's a big character, like a big name. But he's really been screwed over with films. I mean, I remember the Hulk film I grew up with was the Eric Bana one, the 2003 one, and that's.
Well, I grew up with the 70s TV show, Lou Ferrigno, you know. Yeah. So
he's not had a good time on screen, has he, Hulk? No. But the 2003 one wasn't that good. And then obviously when the MCU came around, they made Iron Man was the first film in 2008, and then that same year they brought out the Hulk, and it's a really weird film because they chose none other than Edward Norton to play him, to play Bruce Banner, and it just doesn't fit at all. And like I said, it's almost the forgotten film in the MCU. There could be die-hard Marvel fans, and you ask them to name every single film, and they'll name you 22. And they miss out this one because, like I said, it's a very weird film.
Because surprisingly, I've actually seen. I think is it Avengers Assemble?
Yep.
And I quite liked it, and
because it's played by Mark Ruffalo.
Yeah, I quite like the cool character.
That's the thing with So, like I said, the Incredible Hulk came out in 2008, and then obviously because they tried to do all the origin stories before doing the big story with all the men. When it came round to doing Avengers Assemble in 2012, they kept all the characters, of course, but they didn't keep all of the actors. And the only actor that got replaced was Edward Norton. Mm-hmm. And I think they found the perfect replacement in Mark Ruffalo. And the reason how I know that Marvel didn't like Edward Norton as Hulk is because they don't really care to explain why. Like, of course, they're not going to explain why he's a different person because he's the same person, but it's almost one of those things. Oh, I went away for a long time, so. But yeah, they couldn't have replaced anyone better than Mark Ruffalo, in my opinion. So yeah. Okay.
This is probably going to be one for you as well.
Yeah.
The 2007 Rob Zombie remake of Halloween.
Jesus Christ! Well, what was that story?
Or reboot, should I say?
What was that story about? God, it must have been 12.
Because he did Halloween, and he also did Halloween 2.
Yeah, H2. Well, it's the thing. I'm going to explain it in a sec, but just to sum it up really quickly, I remember it must have been 10, 11 years ago, you tried to watch it late at night. You could only watch 5 minutes of it and you turned it off. I have been unfortunate enough to have watched it the full way through. It's odd because, like I said, Halloween, the John Carpenter one, is just one of those films that you just can't touch, isn't it? It's a masterpiece. You just leave it alone. It's like, can you imagine someone doing a reboot of A New Hope? You just or Raiders. You just wouldn't do that, would you? No. And basically, what happened is Rob Zombie got a bit full of himself, and he was like, "Okay, I can do a much better Halloween film than John Carpenter, even though it was his idea." And he tried to explain. I must admit, fair enough on him. He tried to explain what made Michael, because it starts out for him as a kid, and like about 3/4 of the film is when he's a kid, and it tries to explain what turns him into this killer, and it shows you a lot of the stuff in the Haddonfield asylum, I think, or the hospital, whatever, with Dr. Loomis, but it's almost like a double-edged sword, because when you start to explain why he is that way, it makes him less scary, in my opinion, because I think somewhat like in the original, he just turned one night, he snapped one night, and he killed his sister for no reason. When you try to start explaining it with very human emotions and stuff, it makes it far less scary and far less effective. But it's got every curse word you can think of. It's just...
Well, it's like that. What's more scary is a faceless killer.
Yes, exactly.
And when you try to sort of delve deeper, give him emotions, you take away the thing that makes him scary.
The mysteriousness and the unpredictability of Michael. Don't get me wrong, Tyler Mane is the guy who plays Michael. He's one of the scariest looking guys. He's about 6'7". He's a huge beast of a man. But for Rob Zombies, he went for more of the brutal Michael, where I prefer John Carpenter's Nick Castle, almost supernatural, because I think that's way more scary and more effective. So, I'm never going to watch that film again.
Right.
I'll let you take the raps on this one.
Well, I don't know, because I'm going to go with Indiana Jones and Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, 2008. Now, it is a sequel, but there's some debate whether or not it was actually meant to reboot the whole series.
I heard that as well, actually.
And the idea was that Shia LaBeouf, who plays Indy's son, Muds, was going to take over. And it didn't. And maybe it would have done had the film been more successful. Then perhaps it would have done.
I mean, it's odd because I don't think it's that bad of a film. I remember because we saw it in the cinema.
It's okay, but I just think, Mutt as a character is not particularly likable. I don't think.
I wouldn't have gone with Shia LaBeouf at all.
I don't think. And I just don't think it's very appealing to audiences.
Well, you can't. I think it's stupid how they made him like a greaser, or you just look at Shia LaBeouf. That's not Indiana Jones's son,
You've got this sort of iconic character like Indiana Jones. It just.
I mean, it explores some quite cool themes, but it's one of those films as well. Those 2000 films where. Just the CGI during the monkey scene with him swinging.
Well, they had all sorts of problems with the screenplay thing, the story, what they were going to do it on, and they, it was going to be the NASCAR skulls.
Yeah.
Not NASCAR skulls, the crystal skulls and everything, and it then went into kind of interdimensional traveling aliens and all this kind of.
And it kind of got away from
what makes.
Indiana Jones was very grounded, and it got into just proper like fantasy issues. It just doesn't belong in an Indiana Jones film.
One here, which is maybe controversial,
yes.
The 2006 Superman Returns.
I tell you what, I love this film.
Now, this is a reboot because this is set after Superman 2 in the 70s. Ignore Superman 3 and 4,
so
which you should do. Yeah. And it's not a bad film, but unfortunately, I think it just didn't do very well at the box office.
Well, what happened? Like I said, Brandon Routh is a very good Superman. I thought he was very good. He you can see the dedication he put on the muscle. I can see him as Superman. Of course, it's hard to follow in Christopher Reeve's footsteps, but the reason why this is considered a bomb, because like I said, I think it's a brilliant. It's got, unfortunately, now we'll say in this time it's got Kevin Spacey in it, but he's brilliant as Lex Luthor. It's a very dark Superman film, but has a lot of the themes that the hope and unity themes of Superman, what it should have. And the only reason why this is considered a box office bomb is because they expected it to make so much more money. Because it actually made, I think, in the US alone, it made $300 million, which is, for 2006 isn't bad at all. No. But they expected it to be, because they're Superman, innit? They expected to be made over $1 billion or something, and that's why it's considered. But like I said, hey, if you get the chance, this is because I know you've seen it. If you get the chance, anyone listening, watch it, because it's a really good film. And like I said, I'm going to defend that to the day I die as well. So, yeah.
And the last one I think we're going to touch on is controversially the 2016 Ghostbusters.
Yeah.
Now, so the film cost $144 million. That's just the budget. The box office, it made $229 million, but you think, well, that's not so bad. But they spent loads of money on marketing and other incidentals. So there's rumours that anywhere between 70 and 80 million loss for Sony Pictures. And they're sort of blaming a lot of different things on it not doing so well. Obviously, there's this big whole controversy about men not liking the film because it's got an all-female cast.
Yeah.
Even before it was in cinemas, it was downvoted. The actual trailer was downvoted on YouTube. The IMDb page was downvoted, and they blamed it on a sort of small number of misogynistic men who just couldn't accept an all-woman cast in a film that they loved.
I mean, this thing we're going to say our opinions as two men. That you know what I mean. We don't. I know it's a very touchy subject because it's gender. It's that type of politics sort of thing. But we do not mean to offend anyone. This is just purely our opinion, and if we're wrong to you, then we're wrong to you. There's nothing we can do about that. But
they blame. So they say a lot of the controversy that put people off going to see it.
Yeah.
As well. I mean, it was endorsed by the original cast, Dan Aykroyd, for example, but then he's actually come out afterwards and he's blamed the director, Paul Feig, saying that, there was a lot of scenes that he wanted in the film that he wanted to shoot and Feig wouldn't do it. And then eventually they ended up having to go back and reshoot these scenes, which put the cost of the film up.
Yeah.
Feig just says it's men, basically. His quote was like, the original Ghostbusters is like it's like a tree house that, no girls allowed.
Yeah.
And men just won't accept a Ghostbusters remake, reboot, whatever, with an all-female cast. And I don't think that's right, personally.
Of course not.
And this is actually a reboot. It's not... It obviously takes themes from the original film, but it's not a direct remake of it. So as a standalone film, I mean, I watched it, and personally, it's not a very good film. I just don't think it's funny. I don't think it's got. And I tried to watch it sort of
open-minded.
Yeah. And I tried to forget about the original Ghostbusters and just view it as a standalone film. And it may be just it's objective, It may be that the humour just doesn't translate, that sort of American humour.
I mean, I'm sure there's millions of people who didn't like it, but there's millions of people that did like it,
And reading reviews, mixed reviews. Some people love it, some people hate it. But that's like any film, I think. But I think that's just amplified because of the fact it's an all-female cast.
Yeah. It's an odd one because, like I said, I
wanted to like it. That's the thing. I wanted to watch, and I wanted it to be good, and I wanted it to like it, but it just wasn't. To me personally, wasn't good. And it seems like all the male characters, Chris Hemsworth's character, they kind of go over the top to try to make him kind of stupid and
like, like look down upon.
Yeah.
And this is the thing, right? Forget about the all female cast. It's a Ghostbusters film. We both love Ghostbusters. I wanted to like this film because it is part of that Ghostbusters sort of franchise. But like I said, I didn't like it, and I know a lot of people are going to say, "Well, you didn't like it because you're a man, because it's an all-female cast." But no, I just think that. I mean, I can pinpoint one scene, the elevator scene.
The elevator scene is where it's their first job. They go to this hotel, and that's where they catch Slimer.
Yeah.
But they're going up in the elevator, and they've got their proton packs on, which haven't been tested fully. And so I think, is it...
Venkman says to Ray that they've not been tested, and you see him and Egon slightly start moving away from Venkman, and they look worried. They have like a worried expression on their face, and for me that is
that's a subtle joke, which is quite funny.
It explains the joke in what it must be 40 seconds, and it actually like that physically makes you laugh. For me personally, I love that type of comedy because it's smartly written. Like someone's actually thought of that, and if I compare it to the same scene how they explain the proton packs, it's literally they're in like a alleyway, and Melissa McCarthy's character puts on the proton pack, and as she turns it on, she starts flying her everywhere. She's up. Flying in the air and shouting, screaming, and it goes on for quite a while, and it is again that cheap slapstick comedy, and in a film like Ghostbusters where it stars some of the best comedic actors and writers from obviously Saturday Night Live, they've written that smart comedy before, and like I said, Ghostbusters is one of the most smartly written comedies of all time. It just doesn't compare at all for me personally. And like I said, it's Ghostbusters, the original, is much more to the point, and it's a bit more serious, but that's what makes it funnier, in my opinion. Like I said, there's going to be people that find the 2016 funnier because they find slapstick. But for me personally, I just find the smartly written comedy in Ghostbusters, the original, just generally funnier.
But I would say this about any film, that rather than take a risk on producing an original storyline for an original film, it's easier to remake or reboot an existing franchise or existing film, because you know that you're going to get an audience from the people that loved the original, generally speaking.
It's just with that, I have a problem with it because I was like, in my head, I'm like, if say like the studio can't be bothered to give us an original, fascinating storyline, why should I bother giving you my money to go and watch the film? And I think the reason why people were so annoyed is because not because it's an all-female cast, it's just because even though it was a reboot, it has a lot of ties to the original. It uses a lot of the same dialogue, believe it or not. It uses a lot of the same scenes to push it in that same direction. And like I said, if they just made a film, a standalone film that's not called Ghostbusters, with an original idea, I think that'd be much more fascinating than taking an old 80s classic like Ghostbusters. Like I said before, with Halloween, with Raiders, Ghostbusters is one of those films you just don't touch. It's a classic. It doesn't need anything else. It is on its own. It's a standalone. It's a classic. And like I said, even if it had been an all male cast, I can tell you, I still would have been pissed off. And I know a lot of people aren't going to believe me. That's fine. But that is God's honest truth. But it's just a hard one. Like I said, I really did try and like it, but I just couldn't.
But it's not just that. I mean, there's other films that I don't like because I don't like the people in it or whatever.
Well, I can name. I'd need 20 fingers, but I can name the amount of actors you hate. You know what I mean? That you won't see.
Yeah.
So it's not got nothing to do with gender. It's got nothing to do with the actors themselves. It's just the story, the creativity behind the films.
Yeah. I think if you are going to remake a film or reboot a film, at least make it good.
Make an original story from it, I
mean, a reboot gives you a blank slate, really, to take that original idea.
It's just what's the point in spending all that money rebooting it, having that blank slate if you're just going to do the same thing again? So, that's really what's in my head with this thing. Like I said, it's quite hard. You got to, But like I said, we just want to say that it's got nothing to do with gender. It's got nothing to do with the actors themselves. It's just, like I said, we're big Ghostbusters fans, and we believe that you shouldn't touch a classic like that. So,
yeah. I mean, these other films, like we said, Halloween. Why touch something like Halloween? Because it doesn't. If you're gonna, what I question is when somebody comes to do a remake or a reboot, I ask why you're doing it.
Yeah.
I can understand if you're trying to introduce that, characters or that concept to a whole new audience. I know, films are, a film made in the 60s is going to look dated and maybe needs to be updated.
Yeah.
But like I said, it's just some films you just think, well, like Psycho, for example.
Yeah, what's the
why do a shot-for-shot remake of a classic film like that? What was the point in doing it?
And you know what it comes down to? That's a very good point that you've made.
Money.
It's money.
Yeah.
And that's why we don't like this 2016 one, is because they knew it was going to make loads of money. Of course, it lost money as well. Yeah. But I'm sure when they made it, they didn't expect it to lose money. They expected to make billions, maybe.
It's kind of a cynical thing where they'll do a remake or a reboot knowing that they've got almost like a captive audience.
Yeah.
And it's like that thing I was saying the other day. You put out a Star Wars film, and Star Wars fans will go and watch it, regardless of if it's shit or not, and they'll go and watch it 2 or 3 or even more times because there's the appetite there for those films. And I think there is the appetite there for Ghostbusters. I know there's another Ghostbusters film coming out later this year, and there is an appetite there for it. I wanted to see a Ghostbusters film. I wanted to see so I wanted to like the film.
Hopefully it looks with the new Ghostbusters film, it's an original story.
Well, it is actually a sequel because the original cast are in it.
Yeah. But it's taken it to it looks like it's taken it to somewhere else. So
because the idea behind the 2016, that was going to be the start of a new franchise, which I think Sony abandoned. But yeah.
But yeah, like I said, we're going to see it in cinemas, and we're going to review it as well. We're generally fascinated about this new film. Yeah. But hey, if it's shit, we'll come on here and tell it's shit.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
There's a lot of films, there's a lot of remakes and reboots I've seen that that I hate.
Yeah. It's just part and parcel of being a film, like watching films. It's part and parcel of anything. There's good things and bad things, isn't there? And film's no exception. So.
And I'm sure there is a minority of men out there who didn't want to see it purely because it had.
Of course there would have been full-on misogynists who would have hated it. But like I said, it's a minority, and it's not fair to think that that's all men when it really isn't.
And just because you don't like something, that's your taste. It's not based on anything other than what you like.
Yeah.
There's lots of films that you like that I don't.
Vice versa as well. So. It's just like I said, it's just with anything, isn't it, really? But
please don't write in. So I think that's...
Yeah, I think we covered everything.
Yeah. I think the thing to take away from that is, you get some remakes are good, some are bad. Some sequels are good, some are bad.
But it's a very fascinating topic.
Yeah.
I think we should mention.
We're in celebration of Star Wars Day on the 4th of May. We're going to do a live stream podcast tomorrow at 2 p.m. British Summer Time. You can join in with that if you want to.
And it will be posted on May the 4th?
It'll be, we'll do a live stream, but the live stream's recorded, and then we'll post it to our normal channels on the 4th of May. So that's Spotify, iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and everything else, YouTube.
We're just going to talk about all things Star Wars because we're two huge nerds.
We're going to talk the Skywalker saga. So... yeah, if you want to join us, Phil, please feel free.
That, yeah.
All that's left is to thank you and
thank you very much, and see you next week.